1500 BC. That's when the Rigveda was composed. Not because the text said so. No one had excavated an Indian settlement site. No one had mapped cultural rares going back thousands of years. The evidence didn't exist yet. Does the society described in the Vedas appear suddenly around 1500 BC? And the answer was no. So the question, it changes. If not 1500 BC, then when? A society capable of the Shukla Yajurveda system must be capable of building a civilization. Precise geometry, strict orientation, standardized units, modular construction, large-scale coordination. And that society exists in archaeology, and that is the In 1785, a British judge in Calcutta made a discovery that would change everything. His name was William Jones, and he noticed something impossible. Sanskrit, the ancient language of India, looked like Greek, not vaguely similar, structurally identical. The verb roots matched, the grammar pattern mirrored each other. Even the word for mother and father were nearly the same. And this wasn't a coincidence. This was a family. Language, well, they don't evolve the same features independently. They inherit it, which means somewhere thousands of years ago, there was a common ancestor. One language that split into many. And if languages diverge over time, you can measure the divergence. You can estimate when this split happened. For the first time, scholars had clock. By the mid-1800s, European linguistics were building timelines. Sanskrit texts were arranged like fossils, earliest to latest. The Vedas went at the beginning, and everything else, well, it followed. But there was a problem. To anchor the timeline, they needed external dates, Persian records, Greek accounts, inscriptions that connected to known history. And when those connections were made, one date was locked in place, 1500 BC. That's when the Rigveda was composed. Not because the text said so, not because archaeology proved it, but because the model required it. And once it was written in a textbook, it stopped being a hypothesis. It became a fact. When the dates were chosen, archaeology barely existed. No one had excavated an Indian settlement site. No one had mapped cultural rares going back thousands of years. The evidence didn't exist yet. So the date, it went unchallenged. Universities taught it. Scholars cited it. It became consensus. And consensus, once formed, is almost impossible to break. But then we started digging. In the last two parts of the series, we stopped looking at the text and started looking at the archaeology, the ground. We asked a simple question. Does the society described in the Vedas appear suddenly around 1500 BC? And the answer was no. The archaeological record shows continuity, settlements, tools, cultural practices, stretching back thousands of years before that date. The Vedic world didn't arrive in 1500 BC. It was already there. So the question, it changes. If not 1500 BC, then when? The Rigveda isn't one book. It's not even one time period. It's layered, like geological strata. Each layer preserves a different world. The earliest layer is Mandal 2 through 7. This is pure pastoralism. Cattle are wealth, cattle move with the season. There are no cities, no temples, no permanent structures of any kind. These people are designed to move, not build. So archaeologically, well, this leaves almost nothing behind. No ruins, no monuments, just culture preserved in hymns. And then comes the Mandal 8. Some pastoral base, but something is changing. The geography expands. More clans, longer settlements. Movement is slowing, but it hasn't stopped. Still, almost nothing survives in the ground. And then comes the late Mandal 8 and late Mandal 10. Now is when we see a structure, marriage system, death rituals, ancestors, the concept of Pitralok, the realm of the fathers. This is a society thinking across generations, planning for continuity. And this is where settlements become possible. And this is where archaeology might begin to appear. And then something suddenly changes. Right after this layer, a new text appears, the Krishna Yajurveda. For the first time, we are not looking at a pastoral society anymore. We are looking at a system. Rituals require fixed spaces. Procedures require repetition. Priests require training. Society requires permanence. This is a civilization in making. And now finally, we have something archaeology can measure. This is where the ground can speak back. First, we need to stop calling the region where the Vedas were written Indus Valley Civilization. That name, it's an accident of discovery. Harappa was found first, then Mohenjo-daro, both on the Indus River. So when British archaeologists needed a name, they used what they knew, the Indus Valley. But here's the problem. Most of the sites aren't in the Indus Valley. There are hundreds of miles east, along a different river system entirely, the Saraswati and its tributaries. That's where the density is. That's where the earliest settlements cluster. The Vedas call this region the Sapt-Sindhu, the land of 7 rivers. And when you map the Vedic geography against the archaeological sites, they overlap perfectly. Same rivers, same watersheds, same landscape. If the Vedas describe this region, and they do, then they must be dated against the archaeology of the same region. You cannot separate the text from the ground that they describe. Now watch what happens when you read the Rigvedas geographically. The earliest hymns, Mandal 2 through 7, circle around specific rivers: Saraswati, Purushni, Vipas, Satudri. The Sindhu or the Indus itself barely appears. It's not central, it's peripheral. Then in Mandal 8, the Sindhu becomes prominent. The geography shifts westward. And now check the carbon dates. The oldest site in the civilizations aren't on Indus River. They are on Saraswati systems. Sites near the Sindhu, well, they develop later. And the text shows eastward origins, westward expansion. The archaeology is following the same pattern. Which brings us to Bhirrana. It sits in Haryana along the dried Saraswati course. Its earliest layers date to around 7500 BCE and it disappears around 2600 BCE. That's 4000 years before the Indus cities appear. So this is the oldest continuous settlement we can defend in this region. Clear stratigraphy, calibrated radiocarbon dates, unbroken occupation. So this is our starting point. So here is the test. If these settlements are part of the Vedic world, what should appear in their archaeological layers? Not features from the early Rigveda, that's a mobile pastoralist society, but features from the Krishna Yajurveda, the first text that assumes settlement, organization, and continuity. Rituals need dedicated space, systems need consistency, and training needs stability. That kind of society leaves physical evidence. So if the text reflects real conditions, that evidence should appear exactly when the Yajurveda assumes it already exists. So we are not asking when were the Vedas composed. We are asking, does the ground show what the text describes? If it does, everything changes. The Krishna Yajurveda doesn't describe a wandering society. It assumes settlements have already appeared. Every ritual depends on one thing: the ability to return, to gather in the same place, to perform the same procedures again and again. That fixes the geography immediately. And this society must exist in a stable river corridor. Water, fuel, animal, people, all accessible, all repeatable. So the geography of Krishna Yajurveda should be somewhere between Saraswati and Sindhu. Nowhere else works. So now we know what to look for in the ground. First, let's start with fire. The Krishna Yajurveda assumes multiple fires, managed fires. These aren't cooking hearths. These are separate spaces built for events used repeatedly. So in the ground, this leaves a signature. Clean edged pits, surfaces relayered with ash, secondary dumps where ash was moved after burning. So you see preparation, you see cleanup, you see planning. Household cooking, it doesn't do this, but rituals, they do. Large fires needs more than scavenged twigs. They need planning, wood selection, storage, transport. Archaeologically, this shows up as concentrated charcoal. Ash dumps, fuel patterns far behind daily cooking needs. Fire becomes an operation. So now the tools. The Yajurvedic world runs on repeated toolkit. Grinding stones for preparation, blades for cutting, borers for shaping. These are standardized, used over and over again. So in the ground, you don't find random tools. You find tools classes, the same type appearing consistently across layers. And then the metal appears, small copper tools, pins, blades, rings, fragments from repairs, traces of working, crucible bits, slags, droplets. And then water. The Krishna Yajurveda assumes constant water access for washing, heating, cooling, and repeated use. That means wells, channels, tanks, and managed river access. In the ground, you should find water installation, drainage, vessel clusters near fire zones, surfaces built to get wet without collapsing. So water becomes infrastructure too. Then animals, being offered to the yajna, burning specific parts, disposing the remains in a systematic way. The bones, they should show it. Clusters, repeated cut marks, selective burning. The Krishna Yajurveda assumes memory, training, and knowledge is passed down. That requires staying in a settlement. And finally, the quiet finds. Spindle holes, loom weights, bone needles, fiber impressions on the pottery. You don't see the textile themselves because it doesn't survive, but you see what made those textiles, what bound things, what carried things, what measured things. A procedural society needs the things that tie, wrap, and hold. So put this all together. This looks like a society, one that can gather people, pause their daily work, run complex rituals, and do it again the next season. So if the Krishna Yajurveda reflects reality, this is what the ground must show. Somewhere between the Saraswati and the Sindhu. And now we know exactly what we are looking for. So we narrow the question: fire, metal, tools, cattle, water, and continuity. But wait, you can find these anywhere. Mesopotamia has them. Egypt has them. Every ancient civilization does. So how do we solve this? We need a filter. We need some uniqueness. So first, the fire. The Yajurveda assumes fire is set apart from homes and workshop. Fire as a gathering point and a focal point. Most civilizations embedded fire in production, like kilns, forges, or cooking. Here, it's separated and dedicated. So that's very specific. Second is metallurgy. Copper working exists globally by 4500 BC. That date is solid. But if Krishna Yajurveda society operates closer to 7500 BC to 300,000 BC, then copper itself becomes a test. Either we find it earlier in this corridor or the model breaks. The third is the tools. The Yajurvedic toolkit isn't about conquest or mass weaponry or for fortification. It's about procedure. Preparation tools, shaping tools, measuring tools built for repetition. Most early civilizations, they leave weapons first. But this one, it shouldn't. Fourth is the water management. Channels near the fire spaces. Controlled flow for ritual activity beyond agriculture alone. And that pattern is pretty rare. So the question shifts. We are not asking, do these features exist somewhere? We are asking, do they exist together this early in the same configuration? To answer that, we can't start with Harappa or Mohenjo-daro. Those cities come around 3000 to 2600 BC. Their dates are known, their context is settled. But we have to go earlier, closer to the Saraswati and closer to the beginning. That's where the real test happens. The Saraswati corridor. And we start with fire. Kalibangan sits on the dried Ghaggar-Hakar river. What we find here is not strange for the Vedic society, but it's strange for other contemporaries like Sumer or Egypt. The rows of fire installations outside the houses, not in kitchens, not near workshops, they have their own dedicated zone. These dates are around 3000 to 2600 BC. But the tradition, it starts earlier in the pre-urban layers. Then there is Bhirrana. The lowest level dates to 7500 to 7000 BC. And even here, at the very beginning, the pattern holds. Fire pits, burning installations, nothing mixed into living spaces. All are set apart. Ash deposits in discrete context. And within those altars, we find bovine bones and animal remnants 9,000 years ago. And the same pattern shows up at Banavli, at Kunal, at site after site. Fire features separated from house, often in open courtyards near platform spaces. In 4th millennium BC, thousands of years before the cities appear. And around those fires, the ash isn't scattered. It's moved, dumped into pits, layered deliberately. Someone cleaned up, someone maintained these spaces, and people came back. These fires happened again and again. But now comes the impossible part. Metal. Globally, the earliest copper smelting appears around 4500 BC, West Asia, Southeastern Europe. That date is solid. But at Virana, copper objects show up in the lowest levels. The levels dated before 6000 BC. Copper bangles, arrowheads, small tools like fish hooks, pins, blades, and rings. Some scholars say contamination, others say intrusion. The debate is fierce, but the objects are there in the deep layers, not on surface finds. Set the controversy aside for a moment. What matters is this: copper appears in the Saraswati corridor earlier than it should, earlier than most of the world. And by 4000 to 3500 BC at Kunal, there is no debate anymore. Copper objects, crucible fragments, slags, full metallurgical activity. And look at what they are making. Not swords or spearheads or weapons. They are making pins, rings, small blades, and awls. Things meant to be used to repair. Things meant to be handled daily. Exactly what a procedural society of Krishna Yajurveda needs. And then there's water. At Kalibangan, wells and drains from the early phases. At Rakhigarhi, large-scale water management. But even the earlier levels show controlled access. At Virana, channels and drainage in the earliest habitation layer. Water is planned, moved deliberately. And here's the key: these water installations appear near these fire altar zones, near the activity area where the rituals were performed. So water and fire together integrated. Now let's look at the animals. Cattle dominates. At Bhirana, Banavli, Kalibangan, cattle remains far outnumber wild species. Cut marks, burning patterns, consistent. And burned bovine bones show up in or near the fire installation. Not mixed with trash, not random food scraps. Patterned deposits. These animals weren't hunted when convenient. They were managed for offerings. And then there is continuity. At Virana, occupation never breaks till 2600 BC. This date will become important later. Floors get resurfaced. Structures built in the same footprint. Fire features renewed, not abandoned. Same at Banavli, same at Rakhigarhi. Repeated maintenance long before Indus urban planning, long before Indus cities. And finally, the quiet finds: spindle holes, bone needles, textile impressions on pottery. From the early phase, not luxury items, the invisible infrastructure, that's the bind, carry, wrap, and measure. The stuff a working society needs. So now take a step back. Taken individually, none of this is extraordinary. But taken together, taken this early, fire sets apart. Water managed, copper accessed before it should exist. Tools for procedure, not war. Cattle central and managed. Settlements, they stay at one place, rebuild and remember their ancestors. All of it before the mature Sindhu-Saraswati phase. All along the river Saraswati. All of it in exactly the configuration that Krishna Yajurveda assumes already exists. So here's the question we actually ask. Does the archaeology of the Saraswati region contain the material world the Krishna Yajurveda takes for granted? The archaeology answers yes. Not maybe, not possibly. Yes. The world described in the text isn't theoretical. It's in the ground and it's been there for 9,000 years. But here is a piece that changes everything. In the Rigveda, there is a god named Rudra. Terrifying, dangerous. He belongs to the wild, forest, storms, disease. The hymn asks him to stay away. He exists on the margin, outside society, outside safety. Then comes the Krishna Yajurveda. Everything changes. Rudra isn't avoided anymore. He's addressed directly. He is now worshipped in their society through a fixed liturgy called the Shat Rudra, scheduled, procedural, performed again and again. Now he has entered the household system in the Vedic text. A god like that, it can't be left undefined. A feared god brought into society needs control, placement, and limits. And he is given a fixed place. And that place is marked by a lingam. Lingam here is not a body part. It simply means a mark, a sign, a point of presence, a way to say that this is where the god is handled. This is the simplest explanation that I could give, because the full evolution of the lingam, well, it deserves its own investigation and its own video. And now let's look at the ground. Across the Saraswati corridor, lingam appears in ritual spaces once settlements stabilize. Kalibangan, Banavli, Rakhigarhi all show this pattern. Fixed ritual areas, rebuilt surfaces, reused spaces, and within those spaces, lingam remains in the place across phases. They don't appear in early pastoral layer. They appear only after people stop moving and start returning to the same ritual spot. And that timing matters, because it's exactly when the Krishna Yajurveda treats Rudra as if he's already inside the society. The text, it shows the shift. The ground confirms it. Rudra enters second life, lingam appears to mark his place, and the transition is physical, not poetic. A change so fundamental that it left traces we can still dig up 5,000 years later. So we have fire rituals, tools, water, continuity, archaeology. Everything mentioned in Krishna Yajurvedic text all appears together at one place in early Saraswati settlements. What happens after is formalization, standardization, and the symbolism we recognize. We see a mature, established, systematically organized civilization. Which brings us to the next Yajurvedic text, the Shukla Yajurveda. In the Shukla Yajurveda, you don't just perform a ritual. You build a space that forces the ritual to happen correctly. Fixed layouts, fixed dimensions, fixed orientations, fixed counts. You get advanced architecture. This world has specialists who can do geometry with a chord, not writing mathematics, doing the mathematics. They build squares, circles, rectangles, perpendiculars. They transform areas while keeping them equal. The ritual spaces run on measurements, not big or small, actual units, Angula, Ananti, Purusha. The altar doesn't get built without them. This means shared measurement discipline, because multiple people must build the same thing the same way. This world thinks in bricks. It counts bricks to measure the size, which means they have a standardized dimension for every brick made in their society. The most extreme example is Agni Chayan. The altar isn't a pit. It's a multi-layer build with assigned brick positions and totals. The thinking is the point. Modular repetitions, layered logic, count logic, placement logic. That implies organized labor and standardized production. The ritual is too technical for improvisation. So they assume the roles. The one who knows the mantra, the one who knows how to build, the one who knows how to measure, and then they have supervisors. A system like this only survives if it can be repeated across time without collapse and with a systemization of knowledge. A tradition that can scale without breaking. We are not comparing yet. We are only defining the signature. So what the Shukla Yajurveda would leave behind if it ever touched material culture. So later, when we open archaeology, what we are looking for is strict cardinal alignments, not casual orientations, right angle obsession, manufactured perpendiculars, repeated measurement units, modular buildings, layered brick construction logic, count and placement culture. That's the profile. And now let's go to the ground and let's see if it's there. So the first thing, Shukla Yajurveda treats direction as a law. East, west is fixed. North, south is enforced. So alignment is produced. They are not doing any guessing on alignments. And now look at the cities. Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Dholavira, Rakhigarhi, Kalibangan. Main streets run north to south. Streets cross each other at east and west. Not even a single degree of deviation, just deliberately aligned. And these cities were not growing randomly. Someone laid them after orientation was already decided. And that's not common in early civilization. So this was a rule-based layout. The Shukla Yajurveda assumes people who can manufacture perpendiculars, using chords, using diagonals, using repeatable methods. And when you look at the Indus Valley walls, you see straight lines, true right angles, blocks that repeat the same portions across kilometers. You only get this right when right angle is a habit. The Shukla Yajurveda, it cannot also work without fixed units, because one error would break the math, would break the ritual. And now look at the Indus Valley bricks. Across the entire regions, bricks follow one ratio and one ratio only. 1:2:4. Same ratio, different sites, hundreds of kilometers apart, and same logic. This only works if builders share a measurement system. And in Shukla Yajurveda, everything was built using the measurements of bricks. So if the bricks are standardized, that's how you will be able to do perfect math and measurement. And the Shukla Yajurveda, it thinks in modules, layers, counts, placement rules. And now look at the Harappan architecture. Drains repeat the same width. Wells repeat the same diameters. Platforms, they repeat proportions. Exactly what modular thinking trains a society to do. And in the Shukla Yajurveda, water also isn't optional. It's regulated, positioned, integrated with fire. And now look at Harappa. Almost every house has water access. Drains are covered. Gradients are controlled. Waste flows away from the living space. And you don't see any palaces or temples, but you see obsessive control for purity and flow. And the text requires units. Material system requires proof. At Harappan sites, Standardized weights, stone cubes, fixed ratios, same system across regions. This is the material version of the same mindset. That's why you don't find giant temples, because they are not mentioned in the text. You won't find permanent fire altars. You won't find monumental gods. And that's exactly the point. The Shukla Yajurveda doesn't build temples. It builds perfection. Ritual structures are dismantled. What survives is the thinking, not the altars. So the absence here isn't a problem. It is a match. And we are not saying that Harappans performed Vedic rituals. We are saying something tighter. A society capable of the Shukla Yajurveda system must be capable of building a civilization like we see in Indus Valley. Precise geometry, strict orientation, standardized units, modular construction, large-scale coordination. And that society exists in archaeology, and that is the mature Harappan phase. No contradiction, no fantasy, just compatibility. Krishna Yajurveda matches settlements and procedure. Shukla Yajurveda matches systemization and order. Not symbol to symbol, but from system to system. And that's, I think, a much stronger text. So this actually brings us to the end. But for now, we started with a date 1500 BC, a date born from linguistics, frozen before archaeology existed. We asked one simple question: does the material world described in Vedas exist in the ground? We followed the text in sequence. Rigveda shows a pastoralist world that almost leaves no traces. Yajurveda shows a settlements, procedure, continuity, and the ground matched. Shukla Yajurveda showed us system, geometry, and standardization. The cities matched it. At this point, the question of compatibility is closed. The Sipsandhu world described in the Vedas and the civilization we call the Indus Valley, well, they share the same land, the same rivers, and same development logic. So this part is settled. But there's something that we haven't addressed yet. This civilization doesn't continue. The city is empty. The system breaks. The order dissolves. Archaeology tells us that clearly. So the next question isn't about origins anymore. It's about the collapse. And if a civilization this structured fell apart, that shock should leave marks. Not just in ground, but in text. The Rigveda doesn't describe collapse. Neither does Yajurveda. They describe system that assumes stability. But there is one part of the Vedic corpus that feels different. The Atharvaveda, specifically book 8 through 20. The tone shifts, the concerns changes, anxiety enters the text, disease, social fracture, fear, protective rituals. A world trying to hold itself together, not by an accident. And that's a different historical moment speaking in the text. So this series, it doesn't end here. It turns. We have closed the chapter of the Indus Valley Civilization. Next, we'll move to what comes after. What happens when the order collapses, when city vanishes, when ritual changes tone. That story begins in archaeology, and it begins in Atharvaveda. And that's where we go next. Until then, this is Harry signing off. Stay curious.